Welcome to another episode of Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement Podcast, where certified financial planner Lauren Sherman shares thoughts on having a healthy mind, body, and spirit, an abundance of wealth inside portfolios and out, and lessons learned from clients and mentors over the years.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement. Today, we are going to wrap up the conversation with Adam Obrecht, who is a financial advisor and owner of AO Wealth Advisory here in Urbandale, Iowa. Just like part one of this conversation, you can find this episode on YouTube if you would like to watch the video. In this episode, we talk about the origin story of why Adam launched AO Wealth, the types of clients they work best with, and what makes the firm unique. So with that quick intro, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Adam Obrecht. Well, part two, we will be discussing AO Wealth. So I'm always interested in the origin story. So how did AO Wealth come about in the first place, and what motivated you to start your own firm? Because you are the owner, or the one that started the firm.
Yep.
Particularly when, it's always easier, I guess you'd say, to just plug in with what someone else is doing. So tell us a little bit about the origin story, if you would.
Yeah. So the really short side of it is back in 2010, I was working inside of a CPA firm as a director of wealth management. And while there, the division I was part of they were moving out to Los Angeles to continue the work it was doing. So managing partner and I sat down and talked about it. And I was going to be the only non-CPA left inside of a CPA firm.
Okay.
Not a good career long-term decision there. If I wanted to stay. And so got a very good exit from that. One of the things in our industry is non-solicit agreements. That got waived. Took my phone number, took my computer, took my file cabinets. So I had a very easy exit from that, but it was, okay, I got the exit, but where do I go?
Okay. And that is a little bit unique, because a lot of times when people leave a firm, it's like, you feel like you have to leave in the middle of the night. So,
yeah.
And it's not always as friendly of a parting of ways as what you just described.
Right. It was about 3 months of planning was able to happen into it. So it wasn't a long-term process by any means. So actually middle of March to the end of June was kind of the time frame of my exit there.
Okay.
So in that time frame, I did start interviewing with others. I did start interviewing with other firms in town, and something always popped up as I don't want to do it that way, or I don't want to, something about their business structure didn't fit who I was.
Right.
And I heard a quote recently about, what does it take to be an entrepreneur? And it's somebody that's willing to work 80 hours a week for 50 grand instead of working for somebody else 40 hours a week for 100 grand.
Interesting.
And yeah, that was me back then. So all the other doors in front of me kind of got shut, and God's kind of said, hey, go this route. And so that was the route, was creating AO Wealth Advisory. Had some phenomenal support around me with a friend that was in a marketing agency to help with the naming of it, help with the logo, help with what does the branding and some of these things look like that we still use today. Our tagline of earn, invest, give, maximize your earning power, invest it wisely so you have the confidence to give. That was something that was created back then from an outside vendor, basically outside friend that saw that in what I was trying to do.
Yeah, I like that.
So started in a small office in Waukee and worked there for a while, and then eventually now have an office in Urbandale, and there's 3 others in the office with me on a daily basis. So,
cool. Yeah, it's and you have to wear a few more hats when you're starting a firm, but I think certain personalities kind of embrace that and like to have their fingerprint on everything. And or to a certain extent, you can obviously still delegate things, but I sometimes people ask me a similar question of why I started the firm. And some of it's just like, well, I was stubborn enough that I had this vision of what I wanted to create, and it wasn't out there. So
Yep.
it definitely takes a little bit of a different type of personality to want to overcome that and work the 80 hours to make half the money as you described.
Yeah. And I think over time I've become unemployable with that
Mm,
because I do really enjoy the aspects of running a business as well as the aspect of client work. Um, if it was just I wanted to run a business, okay, go run the business for somebody else. If it was just client work, it's like go work for somebody else and do the client work.
right,
I enjoy the crossover effect of we do this in the business that affects the clients, or we do this for a client. We need to be able to add that into the business piece. So I truly do enjoy that, but I also enjoy the we aspect. So I do enjoy having others in the office. I do enjoy having
yeah,
employees and partners to work with. I'm not in the solo world only. There are
right,
those that are building lifestyle practices and are solo, and that's what they love. There are enterprises that are, larger mega firms. We kind of sit in the middle of that and
right.
enjoy that space.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. If you had to describe the perfect client or the ideal client, someone walks into your office and you say, okay, these are my people, I'm speaking directly to them. What would that look like? Or I guess asked in a more straightforward way, who is your ideal client, so to speak?
Yep. So we kind of look at it as like, when do we usually start working with people? Because as you know, financial planning is a long-term engagement typically. I mean, this is seeing people get married, seeing people have kids, seeing those kids go off to college. I mean, it's a long-term relationship that you have with a family. So for us, we usually get it introduced to families in their 30s and 40s. They're usually going through a job change. They're usually having kids. That's when we start working with the couple. Um, and they've got some 401ks to deal with. They've got some old retirement money to deal with. They've got savings questions to deal with. They've got some unmet education planning needs. That's usually the beginning of the conversation for us.
Okay.
But we're also not a niche firm where we only have X. We deal with all ages. I think
Okay.
90 plus is our oldest client right now, down into people just starting out. But the core of when they come to us is usually in their 30s and 40s.
Okay. Yeah. And just having the CFP gives you a wide range of ability to work with, people in a lot of different circumstances.
Yep. And the ages of staff in the office, Eric is 8 years younger than me. Dason's about 15 years younger than me. So we've got a range of ages of staff as well to be able to deal with the issues that clients are going through at those ages and stages too.
Okay. And we were talking a little bit about this the other day that sometimes it's not necessarily the age of the client and the amount of assets and things like that. It's a little bit more personality driven. And if,
Yes.
you probably or work well with maybe certain type of personality where maybe Eric works better with a different type, and having that flexibility within the office is probably a pretty handy thing.
Yeah, very much so. The small joke on this side is a Cyclone versus a Hawkeye.
Sure.
I'm a Cyclone fan. Eric's a Hawkeye fan, so we can cover the whole state that way.
I went to Central College, so I was right between the two. So I try to walk the line.
Yep.
Sometimes for really passionate fans, that doesn't fly, but try to walk the line a little bit there.
Yep. So yeah, different personality types and different life experiences too.
Yeah.
Um, I'm more of a small town Iowa kid that went on to in agriculture and ag business as a degree at Iowa State. So when it comes to farming questions or agricultural questions, I end up with those more. Eric was the student athlete in college, and so people that kind of had more of that background
Okay.
tend to enjoy having the conversations with him. But for us, our clients are firm clients. So they're a client of the firm.
Mhm.
So when a client has a question, who can answer this question best is what's going to help.
Okay. So it's not like I'm a client of Adam's. I got to talk to him. Whoever's there can help.
Right. You know, and like Dason's been more recent with student loans. So if you've got student loan items, that's something he's dived into because it affects him personally.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like you're building it the right way too, because I think so often the natural tendency is for us to want to hire people that are our same personality a little bit. We're
Mm-hmm.
kind of naturally gravitate towards that exact same personality. But if you have a little bit of different personality and different experiences, that probably benefits the clients because you have a wider range that kind of mesh with people.
Yep. And just another set of experience, a nice set of knowledge base to go after.
Right.
Um, and because it is such a long-term relationship too, the age thing will matter. You know, somebody that if they're my age hiring me, well, likelihood when they retire is going to be similar time when I'm going to be talking about my own retirement. Whereas if we have some younger people in the office, that relationship continues on. So,
Yeah. Probably one of the big benefits of being looking at clients from a firm level versus an individual advisor level too.
yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about if I asked you what makes you or maybe the firm unique, either unique in your process or unique in the firm, that's different from others? Anything that jumps to the top of your mind?
Um, we're very financial planning focused, and that may seem like a unique trait, but what we find is it's a unique trait.
Mm,
I can think of a handful of other firms kind of in the metro area that the investment conversation is not the lead conversation.
right.
The financial planning conversation is the lead conversation. Investments need to be part of that. They need to be good. They need to do what they're expected to do. But having conversations around mortgages, having conversations about kids' college, having gifting conversations, how to maximize other things other than just the investments.
Right.
There are not a lot of firms that get into that level of conversation. This time of year, obviously, the tax return is a big conversation.
Sure.
And how does not just your taxes today, but your taxes at 75 become something that is not a burden on you? And how do you maximize that wealth to pass to the next generation, to the next charity or to the next family member? So,
Right.
um,
Yeah, the term comprehensive planning kind of became a catchphrase and like it's on everybody's website, right? But then
yep.
when you dig into it, are people actually doing that planning and that, when the rubber meets the road, that's what's really important.
Yeah. And we usually find people have had a investment manager or a stockbroker. They haven't had a financial planner.
Sure. That's funny you say that. I think my very first podcast I ever did. So the way that these podcasts originated was I was writing a newsletter article and then I just transitioned that into the podcast. And the very first one I ever did, I think was maybe not that great because I was basically reading my newsletter and we speak in different ways than the way we write something. But at any rate, it was kind of this exact conversation about how advisors, a lot of advisory firms are still kind of under the business model of the 90s, where they were the access to the market
Yep.
and the investment management, if you want to call it that, was everything. And a lot of firms still kind of try to get away with just doing that. And I think that's it. It should be pretty darn hard to get away with, you know, that's your only value to the client. But as you mentioned, I think that's still predominantly a lot of what's out there.
It is. And I mean, there are segments of people and segments of businesses that need just a good investment manager, and that's all they need. You know, I
Sure.
think of some of the like was on a school board for a while. You know, the cash the school has needs to be invested in short-term treasuries and money markets and things that way. They need an investment manager to do that. They don't need financial planning.
Sure.
Um, and there's individuals that all they need is, hey, we've got the financial planning piece figured out. We do need just investment management.
Yeah.
So that segment of the industry needs to exist, but that's not the majority of what we're running into. We're running into the couples that need the financial planning piece, and they don't know when they can do Roth IRAs. They don't know when they can do certain things that'll help them long term, whether it's reducing a tax burden, whether again passing more money on to family members, freeing up their debt load, managing things in a way that bless them going into the future. That's the financial planning conversation, not just an investment conversation.
I think you nailed it. Sometimes that falls into, if you have those 4 boxes of like, we know what we don't know, we don't know what we don't know. Sometimes some of that falls into, we don't know what we don't know. So people will come to you and sometimes only want the investment management. And then you start to dig a little deeper and you can help them all sorts of ways with their Social Security, their income planning, their tax planning, estate planning, stuff like that. Yeah, it's probably helpful to go through that process to some extent for everybody, really.
Yep. And the rules change every year. And so the self Googler that looks up a rule this year, well, next year that rule may change and the tactic may change. And that's what we're in the business of, is we're doing that research. We're figuring out all of these rule changes. Just the required minimum distribution rules over the last 40 years, every year there's been a new change.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What's the saying? There's an abundance of information out there, but it's having the knowledge of how to apply it to your specific plan that really is valuable. It's not the information itself, it's the application of it.
Yep. And everybody's situation is different. Everybody's values are different. How do they want to deal with the resources they've been entrusted with?
Right.
We can give advice on how we think we should do it, but again, it's still their money in the end. It's still they're in charge of it. They've been granted the stewardship of that resource. And they may say, no, we want to go this way with it. Okay, great. Tell us why. And that will help our advice in the future.
Right. So this next question I have for you, unpopular opinions or beliefs that you have about investing, or maybe even just the business in general that run counter to most. Do you have any of those that jump to your mind?
Products, in industry products, I'd say is probably what tops my mind. For us, products have a place, but they shouldn't be driving the conversation. And what I mean by that is this latest, greatest annuity, or this latest, greatest long-term care piece, or this latest, greatest way to package an investment in an ETF or a closed-end fund or a unit investment trust. The list goes on and on and on. All of the products have a purpose. Are you the purpose is what needs to be figured out, versus the other way around. I have a product and you definitely need it because it's the only thing I know.
Right.
So I think there's a challenge in the industry to match the product with the right person versus the other way around.
Right.
And we use a lot of different products, and I haven't found one that is just, I can't find any use case for. It may not be something we use, but I can at least understand the use case of why did this get created? Why did a company think that how they're structuring this product is right for the industry and right for the consumer to have? A lot of times, though, we see these products oversold to the consumers that don't need them, though.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it, because the products itself inherently are not good or bad. It's just how they're used. And I think, unfortunately, the industry does deserve a lot of the negative vibes that they get from, people out there that are just, what's the saying? If you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right?
Yep. And that's where, if you'll find a lot of articles on never buy this product.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Never do this item. Like, well, maybe not. You may be the reason why that thing exists.
Yeah.
So there are definitely some products that are more broadly distributed than they should be. And I think that's where those articles come from. But in the end, it exists for a reason. Are you that reason or not?
Right. Yeah, it's hard. Sometimes I get so passionate about when it comes to like the topic of fees and stuff like that, that you can kind of plant your flag in the ground but then you have to be careful and say, well, I'm really passionate about the flat fee but not everybody, that's not a right fit for everybody, particularly if there's not enough assets there that justify the fee. And you get yourself into a little bit of trouble if you speak in absolutes too much, whether it's about fees or products or what have you.
Yep. Yeah, and we love the passion behind it. And it usually is a sales driven mentality to have the passion behind some of those opinions, to have
Mm-hmm.
those absolutes, to try to draw that line between you and somebody else. But in the end, are you the right fit, both firm wise, product wise, all of those things for the right client fit?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Let me think. Is there anything that we haven't touched on the firm, or um, maybe speak to a little bit, just real briefly, about your guys' process from a 10,000 foot view? Like if someone walked in your office and said, "Hey, I want to start working with you," kind of just a quick overview of what that process looks like.
Yeah, so we're going to have a get to know you meeting. Back to the personality piece, we want to make sure that we are a right personality fit and the services we're providing are the services you need. Um, had a couple actually here recently that they're not the right fit for us because what they're looking for at this point in time is something different than what we do. 2 to 3 years from now, we may be the right fit for them. But at least as it sits today, we're just not quite the right fit for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to make sure that that is a good scenario, that they don't get into something that they aren't comfortable doing, and vice versa on our side.
Right.
And then we go into starting to build that financial plan, and where are areas in their current financial life that can be improved. And it won't happen right away, but our goal over time is to get to know their finances better than they know them, and see where those improvements can happen, and sometimes it's a small improvement, but it'll have a compounding effect over time. And that's what we're really looking for is the time value of money, and the compounding effect of money can happen not just in investments, but it can be, oh, your property casualty insurance premium is too high. Oh, you forgot to deduct what you're paying your kid's school on your Iowa taxes.
Yeah.
Had one the other day that their will, the attorney had just copied the page from the husband will and put it in the wife's will. And so the beneficiary listings were wrong
Oh, wow.
in the will, because it said this goes to my sister. Well, this person wasn't her sister, it was her husband's sister.
Right.
The name's right, but the vernacular is wrong. It's like, will this truly be a problem in an estate? Could or couldn't be. We
Maybe,
know it's
maybe
wrong
not,
right
but
now.
lawyers will certainly have fun with it.
Right. And so we want to, it's just an extra set of eyes to look through some of these things, and try to find the potholes for them to avoid.
What I like about a lot of what you were just saying too is that the compounding of those over time, it's kind of wild how just some simple tax strategies can enhance the portfolio as a whole dramatically, especially when you illustrate that out over 20 years with, I think we kind of have our minds have a tough time of wrapping around like compounding interest and how big of an impact this stuff can have.
Yep.
And usually it's a teeter totter of, I want a bigger portfolio, so I got to have better returns and take on more risk. And a lot of what you're describing is you're adding value to the portfolio without adding additional risk to the portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah. Tax strategies are definitely an easy area that can be picked up on. But there's other areas too, like we mentioned, whether it's the insurance side, whether it's debt management, you know, things inside of if somebody owns a business, things inside of the business on structuring it. We bring in the experts, whether it be the attorney, whether it be the CPA. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes those other professions and us disagree because we're looking at the problem differently.
Sure.
Um, since it's this time of year, we'll keep picking on the taxes.
Right. That's what comes to mind.
Yeah. Sometimes we're doing things that is creating a taxable event today for the client because we're looking at a future event that's going to be a worse taxable item. So we want to pay a little bit today instead of a bigger number later.
Right.
And the CPA is looking at it to go, well, why are you paying any tax today?
Right.
Let's bring that down as low as possible. It's like, well, we're trying to balance this out instead of having a really low and a really high. Let's do an average in the middle, and it works out better for the client in the end.
Right.
Obviously, there's assumptions there. There's not for every situation, but the idea that also how an attorney might look at putting titling of an account versus how custodians and how products look at titling the account, they don't always agree either. Like, oh, we need to put this account in a trust. Well, maybe we make the trust the beneficiary, not put the account in a trust.
Sure.
Because that's how the custodian works at it better, or the type of an account it is, so that the client has more ability to do what they want with the assets later on. But those are great discussions to have with other professionals, and they're looking at the problem one way, we're looking at another, and we're both trying to serve the client in a phenomenal way.
Right. Yeah. The tax professional one always comes up. The analogy I've always used with clients is that the CPA is the doing rear view mirror tax planning, looking backwards of what happened, where the financial planner's objective is more windshield tax planning, looking out the windshield moving forward, and both serve important purposes, but you just have to put the two together. It's not that one kind of can dominate, both are needed, I should say.
Yep. And we want to be tax smart, but not so tax smart that we become investment stupid.
Sure.
And same with investments. We want to be investment smart, but we don't want to be so investment smart that we're tax stupid.
Yeah, the old saying, don't let the tax tail wag the dog.
Yes.
I just had this conversation with the client yesterday, actually, where we were speaking about getting into that Medicare IRMA threshold where they're going to have to pay more for Medicare because of his income. And he started to say, well, does it make more sense if I just retired a couple of years early, but he enjoys what he does and he's really good at it? And I said, sure, it would keep us below, but that's entirely letting the tax tail, as they say, wag the plan or the dog. So
yep,
you have to avoid that.
There are certain things that you are going to pay more for if you do, but it's never 100%.
Right.
So, and you're probably doing that item for more benefit than just the economic benefit.
Right.
So sometimes, yes, you're going to pay more, but you enjoy the activity. Keep doing it.
Right. So one of my last questions as we kind of wrap up here. So now let's imagine they've gone through that process. They are a client.
Yep.
What's the kind of ongoing cadence look like? Annual reviews, like meetings, that type of thing?
Yeah. So for us, meetings, it probably is a little bit different on some others. Is meetings are going to be when you want them. Sometimes it's going to be annual. Sometimes it's going to be 3 times in a month because I've got a major event happening. But we want to stay in contact with our clients every 3 to 4 months. Phone call, email, office visit, Zoom call, whatever it is.
Sure.
Things change over that time frame, but usually not a ton. Over time, things change a lot more. And so we want to be there for the incremental changes along the way. Instead of just all of a sudden, oh yeah, it's been X period of time since we met you. Here's all the things that have happened.
Right.
No,
yeah, I've always thought that the annual review, it's on this date. It was a little bit of an arbitrary date. Sure, it's good for planning because you have it in your calendar and it forces you to do it. But, what happens if you had your annual review and then tax law changes the next week and you say, well, sorry, we just had our annual review. Yep. So I do like that more ongoing type of flexibility that of what you talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the dentist office. When I leave the dentist office, I get a 6-month appointment set That's not our model. Our model is we're going to follow up, and when a follow-up needs to turn into a meeting, we do.
Yeah.
And our follow-ups have purposes to them, whether that is the purpose of talking about a specific change in the law that affects them, or that they're getting close to a retirement date, or they're getting close to the rule of 88 as an IPERS employee, or a Wells Fargo employee. They've got 80 credits, or different things that happen in their life that we've documented over time, stock options coming due, whatever it is. Those follow-ups have purposes to them.
Right.
But it's going to be geared to their purpose, not ours.
Right. And it's going to be more beyond just here's what your portfolio did in the last 3 months type of conversation.
Yep. Yeah, we got tons of factual information on that, statements that go out on that, performance reports that show our fees and what they earned net of all those fees. Because we want to be transparent. Here's what you paid us for the next quarter. You're going to see that number. It's not going to be a hidden something.
Right. I still talk with people today that have an advisor, and sometimes, they don't think they're, I say, well, what's the fee on that? And they say, well, they don't charge me anything. And I still kind of cringe that the industry as a whole hasn't come around to more transparency of fees, because if you think your advisor is not charging you anything, unfortunately, it seems like there's a lot of people that do think that, and it just means that they're probably layered under some small print, and it's not as transparent. So,
yep.
Yeah, I think it's important to have those out there so people know what they're paying.
Yeah, we look at net return. So what is your return after everything's been paid?
Yeah.
A stock or a bond is the purest form of investment typically. CDs get in there too. But then from there to you, how much of that return did you keep?
Right.
And that gap is that fee drag. Sometimes, and this goes back to training from the 90s and 2000s and some of that area too, of paying fees can be beneficial to get a better net return. And then there's other times that it's not. Other times, I talked about the product discussion, you're paying a fee to get a benefit that you need. And so there is a fee in there accordingly there. And so it is to your benefit that you're paying that fee. Mm-hmm. And other times it's an excess fee I'll never use. So trying to find the right balance between the fees you pay and the benefits you're receiving, that's what we look at. But net return, what did you actually return in the last quarter? Or how much bigger was your loss in the last quarter because of these fees?
Sure. Yeah, it's always tying it to the value in return, because a cost is kind of irrelevant to a certain extent, as long as it's tied to the value in return.
Yep.
That's what's most important. And I think cutting out fees that don't have any value, that sounds like what you're talking about.
Yep, definitely.
Where can people find you if they would like to find more info about you and your firm?
Yeah, so should just be able to search AO Wealth Advisory. That was one thing early on. I learned that some people try to confuse us with AOL if I say it too fast. But also Facebook, we are somewhat active there. Really aren't too active on some of the other social medias, but do have a place in most of the social medias. Or offices are in Urbandale.
Okay. Well, we'll be sure to link your website in the show notes of where to find you. That will wrap things up for today. As I mentioned, you can find a link to AO Wealth Advisory in the show notes. I also want to say a big thank you to Adam, first for sharing his passion of flying with us in part 1, and of course today for telling us more about his firm, AO Wealth. And as far as our firm here at Integrity Wealth Management, for anyone nearing retirement, or even those who are already retired, we are offering a complimentary retirement checkup called Retirement Risks Analysis. This is a color-coordinated report grading all 14 of the biggest challenges that people face in retirement. This is condensed to one page front and back, and it allows you to immediately see where your plan's strengths and weaknesses are at. Because once again, it is color-coordinated. So just by glancing at your results, you can see which risks had a green result, meaning little to no improvement is needed. You can also see which have a yellow result, which means there are some moderate adjustments that could be made to reduce those specific risks. And then finally, we don't like to see too much red on the page, but it's always better to know early than to be surprised later. And if you're following along, red, of course, means that there are more considerable improvements that can be made to reduce those specific risks. If you would like a complimentary retirement risks analysis personalized to you and your situation, simply click the link in the show notes titled Share More and Get in Touch. And as always, you can find past episodes by visiting our website, integrityguidance.com, and clicking on the podcast tab. I will see you in just 2 weeks for another episode. God bless.
Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, we would love if you took a quick moment to leave an honest review. Of course, we're shooting for 5 stars, but if you have suggestions to improve the show, we would love to hear from you too. Just click on the podcast name, Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement Podcast, and scroll down to ratings and review. Thanks again for your support, as this helps us reach a wider audience and help even more retirees just like you. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as a specific tax, legal, or investment advice. Lauren Sherman is a certified financial planner and co-owner of Integrity Wealth Management, an investment advisor serving retirees in search of their own healthy, wealthy, and wise retirement lifestyle.